And then I'll pass to my colleague. So my name's Victoria Harris. I'm the clinical manager for speech and language therapy in MCH and also the pathway lead for the Indigo pathway, which includes ASD, but also ADHD.
And I'm Sam Lewis. I'm one of the lead occupational therapists on the Indigo pathway. Do a lot of the diagnostic assessments with the consultants and do support work post diagnosis as well.
I'm guessing that you're all of the same job description, as in the roles that you have are similar. Is that right, Vicky?
Yeah, so this training has been sent out to the social prescribers and link workers in Medway, yes, who support those in the community.
Lovely, thank you. With that, I'll pass over to Sam. As we said, absolutely, hands up. I can see you all, Sam, and I can't necessarily see some of you. And I will deal with all the questions as we go along, and then there will obviously be time at the end to go through any extra questions that you think of. But feel free just to, because it's quite an informal type of training, and we'd rather you were interactive with us than us just sit and do a load of slides for you. I'll pass over to Sam.
Thank you. There are opportunities, like sort of slides that will come up and say we're going to reflect on things or to ask questions then. But yeah, like Vicky says, feel free to ask questions as we go along. That's no problem at all. So like I said before, my name's Sam Lewis. I'm one of the occupational therapists that works on the Indigo pathway. Just a bit of background on me. I've been with the children's team for 20 years, so a very long time. My sins, and the latter part of that has been mainly in working with children with in the autism diagnostics and post diagnostic support as well. So just a sort of a starting opener, really, just to sort of throw it out to all of you, is kind of asking a question of what does autism mean to you and what are your experiences of autism. So if I can just sort of throw it out to everybody here, if anybody wants to share anything at this point around your understanding of autism, personal or professional experiences you might have had with autistic individuals.
I know a few people with autism, but everyone's different. Some of them it's like a form of OCD where they've got to have things at a certain way, and their meal times, you can't mess with their meal times, or if you're arranging to go somewhere, you've got to take them there. You can't take them anywhere different. Some of them are not aware of road safety signs, so they can just shoot out and run across the road.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, both my daughters have got ASD, and the thing that I find fascinating is they both got it, and the spectrum is absolutely huge because they are both so different. And I always get people say to me, "Oh, they don't look autistic," because they're what people say class as high functioning, but they struggle like socially. Everything, especially my 20-year-old, everything is awkward. That's too awkward. But they're both so intelligent, so articulate, but they struggle in so many ways. But I always get that they don't look autistic. My answer is, why? What does someone look like that's autistic?
I think you're right.
Yes, oh, it drives me mad.
And I think it is that thing, we're the slides that come on almost straight away are really looking at what autism is, and that phrase, that the amount of times, for every time that had been said, or they don't look autistic, and it is that kind of what does autism look like then?
Yeah.
Because that's like saying, you don't look typical, or you look typical, or what does that look like? So so if we just I'll sort of flick on to the next slide. So this is just to kind of go over a little bit of sort of diagnostic terminology, really. And so the DSM-5 is something that we use in diagnosing autism, and the official terminology is autism spectrum disorder. There's a lot of feedback and a lot of neuroaffirmative language out there at the moment, and derived from sort of the ND community around how a diagnosis is worded or how autism is worded. And it's gone into sort of more identity first language. So you're looking at saying sort of autistic person, someone will say I'm autistic child, they're autistic. It's coming back from that idea that you know, some of the sort of the pathways as you suffer from autism, as it's something that you know, yes, there are challenges that are presented with autistic individuals, but they're moving away from it was sort of suffer from autism, and then it was on the autistic spectrum, person with autism, given it that all those three sort of imply that you have it and you carry it with you. Whereas the last one, an autistic person, is that is part of your who you are. It isn't something that you can pick up and put down as you choose. You're always sort of carrying what that is with you, and it's part of your identity.
I think we're sorry, Sam. I think we're really mindful of how the language and the terminology changes, and it can change quite quickly. But there is huge research, and certainly with autistic people, of how they would like that neuroaffirmative language to be used. So it is changing. It doesn't stay the same all the time, and I think everybody will appreciate and understand that we're mindful of how that changes. So some of our support that Sam and the team are doing with video support, etc., needs to be updated with the change in that type of description.
That said, I mean, Lisa said at the beginning, sort of used the phrase higher functioning autism. There is drives to be that more, you know, identity first, but it's don't feel you're going to be saying the wrong thing, because people would identify, autistic individuals will identify how they want to identify. People speak about Asperger's syndrome, which is no longer a diagnostic term that is used. However, there will be individuals of a certain generation that will identify as being Aspergic. And we're not saying that they can't identify as that and they've got to identify as being an autistic person now. There will still be those terminologies, those phraseologies out there, because that is part of that individual's identity. So it is about asking the individual you're working with, how do they identify with their autism? Is it something, you know, autistic person? Does someone say they've got Asperger's, etc., so forth? And I think the higher functioning thing is interesting because it implies that if you're higher functioning in autism, you have less problems, which in actual fact is quite far from the case. You've probably seen, you know, autism, Lisa said as well, autism spectrum disorder. Disorder implies that there's loads of things that are wrong. Yes, there are differences and challenges with autism. So some of the diagnostic terminology sort of focuses on deficits and stuff like that, whereas a lot of the shift is around looking at, you know, yes, there are differences, and it's differences, not necessarily deficits to things, because those differences can cause challenges, but they can also cause create a lot of strengths within an individual as well. So the two models we've got there, so what people think autism spectrum looks like, it's always been thought to be more, you know, historically this linear sort of thing, whereby you have individuals that are less autistic and more autistic, which you are an autistic individual, you want less or more of it. So what the model really looks like is this one on the right. It's more of that sort of spectrum, that circular globe of things, whereby each section, and this has got 5 sections in it, but there can be lots of different sections on your skills and what you're looking at. And you tend to kind of, you know, have your skills will be sitting in different areas depending on where, depending on your profile. So it doesn't mean that you just sit at one point on a line. Each skill set sits at a certain level. So if I then sort of move along to the next slide, this gives an idea of kind of where and how a profile might look. So you might have strengths in certain areas, you might have challenges in other areas, and it's kind of regardless of whether or not you're deemed, you know, higher functioning or less autistic or more autistic, your profile, you tend to get these sort of spiky profiles. Also knowing that these profiles can change throughout the day as well, based on the environment people are in, the pressures that they are under, etc., so forth. So you might have more difficulty with your sensory processing in situations that are more stressful, more, you know, more stress inducing, work related things, etc., so forth. So your profile will change as the day goes on, as the week goes on. It isn't something that is necessarily set in stone, which the linear model sort of says you sit here and that's it. Does that make sense to people? You're all nodding. So this very wordy slide, I know, but when we're looking at autism and the diagnostic criteria, we're looking at a number of different sections. So section A, I won't read all that out to you. You've got it there. You can read through it. But as you can see, there's each section is a deficits in, deficits in, deficits in. Again, the wording, historical wording around autism is all looking at deficits. So section A is around social communication and interactions, and that an individual when we're investigating a possible autism, will have needs and challenges within the area of social communication and social interaction. The second section is looking at what we call restricted repetitive patterns of behaviours or interests or activities. And again, I think there was a few examples used at the beginning that certain autistic individuals can have specific interests in something. They can have certain behaviours that looked quite routine and repetitive. One such behaviour will be sort of stimming behaviours that you're probably aware of, but they can be very subtle and they can be very exaggerated as well in individuals. I mean, then that's regardless of kind of academic ability, in terms of intellectual ability. Those stims can be there, and they might come in certain situations whereby that stimming behavior is needed to help with some form of regulation. I'll give you an example. I was at the train station quite a few months ago, and there's a young man sitting next to me, and he got up as the train came in and he started doing, I can't remember on the camera, he started doing sort of flicking his fingers towards the corner of his eye. Obviously doing what I do, I was thinking, okay, that is a stimming behavior, and he was probably doing it to help regulate the fact that it was suddenly getting very busy in the station. But then he got on the train, he sat down, and then that stimming stopped. So he's using his stimming in a certain way, but it does come under that sort of repetitive patterns of movement. So you've got that social communication interaction differences. You've got RRBs, the sort of shows those restrictive repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, etc. But autistic individuals will also present with sensory processing differences as well. We all have sensory preferences. Sensory processing difficulties or differences within an autistic individual is when how they process the world around them really impacts on their functioning in the day. There might be a certain sound that you don't like, but actually it doesn't completely throw you off kilter for the whole day if it happens. So we've got 8 sensory systems. I won't be going into these in finite detail, but just to kind of give you a flavour of each of them, you've got your visual system, so obviously your eyes, your auditory systems, your ears, your olfactory, so your smell, your gustatory, so your taste, your tactile, so your skin and how that receives information. And we then got 3 others that you might be less familiar with. You've got your vestibular, which is your sense of movement, your balance mechanisms. It's your inner spirit level. It tells you which way up you are, how fast you're moving, how slow you're moving, etc. You now have your proprioceptive sense, which is the sensation of where your body is in the space it occupies. So if I stand there with my hands down by my side or my hand behind my back, I know where my hand is positioned in space because I can sense where it is. So when I'm moving and walking and stuff like that, I don't have to look at my whole body to coordinate it. All that feedback is getting sent up and down to my brain, telling me where I am. And then we have something called your interoceptive sense. So this is about your internal mechanisms of your body. So it's all the sensations that come from inside your body. So when you need to go to the toilet, hunger, thirst, to name a few, but it also links in a lot to kind of emotions as well. So your body will feel certain ways when you're happy. It will feel certain ways when you're sad, angry. And it's kind of that understanding of what my body signals internally are doing and then what emotion they do create. And across all these areas here, autistic individuals will have difficulties in some, if not all, of those needs, areas that will impact on sort of their functioning day to day and different day to day as well. I've got a little video to watch now. This is something, so hopefully this will work. This is a little video. It's done, made by the National Autism Society, and it's done from the point of view of a lad, probably about 9 years old, and he's going into a shopping centre with his mum. So you are him in this video initially, and it's basically trying to give you a flavour of kind of how sensory processing differences can manifest in an autistic individual. Obviously, this is done to the extreme. We're not saying every autistic individual feels the world like this, but it is showing how a sort of a build up of those sensory that sensory input can lead to quite a difference in how I'm processing things, and then impact on kind of what you're seeing and what behavior happens as well. But also, when you're watching this video, think about that social communication and interaction side of things, and also some restrictive and repetitive behaviors. And we'll have a little bit of a reflect on it once we finish the video. The video is about a minute and a half long. It can be a little bit, I say, distressing. It can be quite hard to watch. So, you know, if anybody has a problem or anything like that, they can stop it and so forth. So just let me know. But off we go. So it can be quite a hard video to watch because you are watching a young man become sort of very overloaded and overwhelmed in the situation. But what are people's thoughts on what they're seeing there? Anything. I'm not asking for a specific correct answer or anything like that.
Did anybody find it easy to watch? Even a nod of the head? No, okay.
Not at all. It was quite emotional, wasn't it, watching that? And to actually put yourself in them shoes was something else. Absolutely something else. All that going on, all that information going on that I certainly hadn't really thought about. You know, I didn't realise it was like that.
Yeah. And like I say, the video in itself is designed to kind of almost produce a little bit of shock, because actually I think, as you know, as individuals and professionals working with autistic individuals, we try and normalize things. We try and, historically there's that kind of thing about trying to get people to become not autistic. You have an autistic brain. You are born with an autistic brain. You aren't going to change necessarily the way I perceive the world. I will learn and I will kind of develop my understanding of things, but actually there will be things, and this is from a sensory point of view, but you can see as he walks in, and you can see initially, and there's some subtle bits that you can pick up on. He's walking into what is clearly a stressful situation for him, but you can actually see the camera blinks as he blinks. So he's actually, how often are you aware of your eyes blinking? So actually for him in that situation, he's really aware of his eyes shutting and opening, which sounds ridiculous in one way, because you're like, well, why would you be aware of that? But if your sensory systems are such on this sort of high alert state in certain situations, your body your sensory systems are designed, and their primitive baseline is to help you survive. It takes you back to when we were living in a cave and you heard the lion roar. Okay, you fought, you ran, etc. And that's the default of all our sensory systems. So when you're perceiving that information, you will see things will happen and go in the way they do in the video. He's getting drawn into certain visual information. The noises are very overloading, and you get that heightened. You then think about his interoceptive sense, what his body's starting to do in terms of releasing hormones and make what he's making him feel like internally, and his understanding of what that is. Partway through, the reason I say about thinking about the sort of social communication interaction side as well as the restricted and repetitive behaviors, did anybody notice something that he did partway through the video? He did something.
He started counting.
Yeah.
He did. So that in itself is a coping mechanism for him, but could be seen as a restrictive and repetitive or restrictive behavior, or repetitive behavior rather, in that when he's there, he's focusing his attention on his counting, and you can hear in the video things lull, don't they? You can see everything seems to get a little bit more calm, and then his mum turns to him and says, "Are you okay?" And he doesn't communicate anything back. Well, actually, there's also there's also the thing that actually, how often when you're stressed and you're really stressed, are you able to kind of communicate how you're feeling? Not often, I would say, especially if you're in a really stressful situation. Well, for autistic individuals, that stress load could be, that threshold for that could be much lower. So actually, if you're then asking an autistic individual to try and explain in a situation how they're feeling or what it's like, you might not get any words. So we'll come on to sort of strategies later on, but don't assume that because an autistic individual has language and can talk, that actually within certain situations they're able to talk. Their baseline may not be, I'm able to talk to you. It may be sort of some augmented communication. Some individuals use something called prolo quote text, whereby they actually text and the phone speaks for them, etc. So it's not that they can't talk, it's just they have to use other methods and other means in certain situations, because actually from a sensory point of view or from an overload point of view, they can't get those words out in that situation. So just something to be really mindful of. Just because someone can talk doesn't mean they will be able to talk. Does that make sense?
Did everybody have a see the lady with the perfume? Because that has been quite a talked part of the video when we've done it before, is that, excuse me, we don't always think about what that might feel like when we are walking through somewhere like that and people are spraying perfume. Sorry.
It's the smell as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we often, there are maybe sometimes lists that we think, oh, potentially this will cause an issue, but as Sam has quite rightly said, it's as individual as all of us. And I don't know whether any of you, and I can share with me, when I used to walk past Lush, the soap place, that's my sensory issue. I can't deal with all of that smell all at once. It just drives me insane. And I think it's really interesting. Sometimes we don't think about the smell. We don't think, or if we do, we don't necessarily think about where that is in our environment, and we've just walked past someone sprayed some perfume. What's the issue with that? I think the other thing as well, I don't know how Sam feels, is certainly with the gentleman in the photo booth where the camera is taking his photograph, but the child focuses also on his shoelace, which is undone. So it's about looking at that's for him, that's what he's focused on. But I think I don't know, how do people feel? I think it's quite a powerful video. Quite rightly, as Kerry said, it is quite hard to watch, but quite powerful in providing us information on, goodness, we need to relook at it again and look at all those things and everything coming together.
I think it's interesting as well, the point they make, which is quite subtle and quite quick at the end, is you would spend the whole video being that young man, and then at the end, when he goes into that meltdown in inverted commas, and getting overwhelmed, you zoom out and you see what everybody else is seeing at that point in time. So you see a behavior, you see the woman walk past and sort of roll her eyes a little bit that she's on the phone. So sometimes when you're an autistic individual has an episode like sort of featured in the video there, is actually we see the behavior, we see this child or young person that is being then deemed to be a naughty individual. Why are they misbehaving? But actually it's unpicking and looking at why that might have sort of accumulated and got to that point as well. Just assume the behavior is because I'm not getting my own way, or I don't want to be here. It might be I don't want to be here, but not because I just don't want to be go shopping. It's because I can't cope with this whole environment.
I think we're trying to change the world to use, because the word behaviour often has a negative connotation to it. When we literally say behaviour, often people will think of a negative view of behaviour rather than a positive view of it. And like Sam said, it isn't always. It's done to it's certainly not that he's a naughty boy, but behaviour has that label. My team laugh because I like to call it presentation rather than behaviour, because I think behaviour has that view of look at your behaviour rather than it having a positive.
And behaviour, we all have behaviours. Everything we do is a behaviour, because we are sensory beings. We absorb all the sensory information in our environment. Sometimes our brains will do something with it. Other times it will just know it's not really relevant and get rid of it without us even consciously being aware of it. And then a behaviour happens. So if I put my hand on a hot cup and it's too hot, what do? I pull my hand away, don't I? So there's a sensory input and I pull it away. It's saving me from that. Every behaviour you have, that's not a negative behaviour. That's actually a really useful behaviour. You know, if I walk up a curb and I trip on it, I put my foot out to save myself. That's a positive behaviour. Okay, so it's getting away from this behaviour having negative connotations and actually talking about that presentation of someone and how they present in certain situations and why that might be. Leads on to kind of this slide here. Oh, it's not 11 at all. There we go. And about talking about autism. The speech bubble on the right is kind of sort of older language more, and it's focused in the kind of the negative and talking about autism in a negative way. So talking about red flags. So what are the red flags that this individual has autism, or might get a diagnosis of autism? It talks about deficits, so where there are areas that are lacking, if you like, rigid, suffers from symptoms of obsessions, etc., so forth. So kind of very negative connotations to all those words, and with that kind of neuroaffirmative language and kind of a drive from the neurodiverse world, if you like, and population is kind of trying to look at things in a different way. So actually you might have traits, so it's looking at trait characteristics of the condition, and what are your trait characteristics of autism, looking at differences, sensory needs or sensory preferences, prefers consistency rather than doesn't like not being in routine, strengths and what strengths certain autistic traits can bring to individuals. The phrase neurodivergent is meant for those with a diagnosed condition. Neurodivergency or neurodivergence, we're all neurodivergents, or we'll have neurodivergency because of what we are. We're all neuro, but that neurodivergent is around those autism, ADHD diagnosis. And then things like deep interests. So quite often autistic individuals will have interests that seem quite fixed, or they want to talk about a lot. And that doesn't have to be one thing that remains forever. That can be something that is over a short period of time, but autistic individuals might know a huge amount about that. I've had children and young people in assessments who have deep interests, from everything that might be, WWF wrestlers through to types of graphs that you can get at B&Q. So quite a wide range, and that was an interesting session with the types of graphs that you can get. So a wide range in those things, as well as thinking that a deep interest doesn't have to be something that isn't sort of seen as typical, if that makes sense. Quite often in our we talk about a female population and diagnoses in girls and women going up because of how autism presents very differently within that population as well. Deep interest for some girls that we see in their teens, they might have quite typical interests around makeup, clothing, fashion, whatever it might be, but the interest and the level which they have. I've had a young lady who spoke about her makeup and that she liked this, but she knew what color, what number of what brand and where it was and what it did, and all the shades and everything like that. There's that difference in, I have an understanding and an interest in it, and I actually have this in a huge amount of detail in terms of what I know about that. And that's why in girls sometimes things can appear, the phrase masked, because actually some of those things seem, well, this is all typical, there's nothing going there. But when you start to take it apart, you can see some of those differences and those needs there. So just having a little think about, these are just some sort of, off the cuff, there's, strategies and things that you can use when you're supporting the individuals you work with, sorry. Think about, we talk about social communication and interaction. Think about how complex the language is you're using. And I don't mean, if you're talking to an individual, it isn't about, the British language or the English language is so complicated in terms of how we word things and how we use things and idioms we use and things like that, and phraseology we use, that sometimes we'll say things that we don't mean, or we'll phrase things in a way that we don't. We go, oh yeah, you'd be really good at that. And that's not actually what I mean. I actually mean, well, you're not going to be very good at that, but I've said completely the opposite. It's my tone and my intonation that changes what that is. An autistic individual can really struggle with tone and intonation of someone's voice in understanding the hidden message in something that is said. So in terms of reduced complexity of language is around kind of just getting to the point of what you're asking or what you're talking about. And sometimes it can feel quite rude, because as British, as the British are all polite, aren't they? We always are, please, thank yous, etc. Please, thank yous, etc. But it is around trying to get the point across in a clear and concise way. Don't woolly it up too much.
So no, absolutely. So one example I had was with a young man who was getting really, really upset because mum would say to him, go and put your new pajamas on. So I think we need to think about the wording we use. So she was meaning the ones that were washed and upstairs in the airing cupboard. And he was very, very upset because he couldn't find a new packet of pajamas. So I think, quite likely, as Sam said, it's how we get that across. What language are we using? He's quite right. English is one of the most complex languages, and the way that we order the words, what we put at the end, which is what children will often hang on to. They will forget the first section of the sentence often. Again, I'm talking of a child that that has difficulty with that language, and it's about trying to, as the person in the room with that person, is to step back and think, what did I do? What did I say that confused this situation? And that's really easy to say sitting here on a chat, but when you're actually in that situation, it can be really tricky, because you're trying to do two things. You're trying to help the situation and think, oh, I don't know what I've said. And it can be as stressful for the person with autism, or an autistic person, as it is with the person that is with them. So, it's not an easy thing to do, but it is about, like Sam said, thinking about what wording we're using. And is it a trigger word? Is there a thing in there that actually, like this young gentleman, couldn't work out that new had a separate meaning? So for him, it was new, a bit like when another young lad I worked with, and it was mum said, go and put this such and such in the bin, and mum had gone and bought a new bin. Well, for him, the bin wasn't there in the kitchen anymore, because the bin was the one that had always been, and this was a new coloured bin. It had a flip top lid. He didn't actually see it as a bin, so he got himself very, very upset because he wanted to do what he was asked but couldn't find it. Does that make sense to people?
And it is, like Vicky says, it is really challenging to get your mind around how you've said something or how something might have been misconstrued. So sometimes it's just really trying to take that back step and go, what is it I said and what did I ask? A really silly example. I'll go on, Karen.
Oh, I was only going to say that when I go out to see some parents and children, I come across quite a few parents that may also have an autism diagnosis, or they've said they may be ASD themselves but not been diagnosed. So I do find that having to put the language in for parents quite a bit more, little bit at the time, not overwhelming, just like say a couple of activities, or just try and slow down my speaking with them as well.
And thank you, Karen. And that's just about kind of making yourself aware of what you bring to the party, and that expectation that someone isn't necessarily going to take everything you say exactly how you mean it. Another point, explain what is happening. Say things that the order they're going to happen. I use a school example really of when the teacher says, right, we're going out to play, but first you need to do this bit of work, then you need to put your shoes on and don't forget your coat. Well, that's not in the order it happens. So you could, an autistic child could get up and then go straight out to the playground, because the initial instruction that's been given is Oh, we're going to the playground. You know, so there's lots and lots of phraseology around how you word things. So if you're with somebody going, oh, we're going to go to the shops, but before we do that, we're going to make breakfast and we're going to do this, it's not in the order that you're kind of stipulating it. So just think about how you say that. And also what I would take away from some of the things that we're going through today is think about them in your normal day. So if you've got children, think about how you're wording things for them. And at times where they maybe get confused or lost with things and go, well, actually, what am I asking and how am I asking it? Say what you actually mean. Say what you actually mean. Don't you know, like I used the example earlier on going, oh, you'll be really good at that. That's not what I actually mean. You know, if you're going to say something, be clear and explicit with it. Give clear expectations of what is going to happen, how it's going to happen. Use non-verbal communication, and alongside that, you know, use visual supports as well. Visual supports we all use. There isn't this notion that just autistic individuals have to use. Autistic individuals do work better with visual supports, but we all use visual supports. If I go to the supermarket, I'll take a list with me. So I've got a visual list of what I need to get. I have reminders on my phone that pop up at certain points in the week that remind me to do certain things. I use a diary at work which writes down what my clinics are, when my meetings are. So we all use visuals. Visuals can be a word, visuals can be a picture of something, be a photo or a drawing of something. Sorry?
Or an object.
Or an object, yeah, to sort of bring meaning to it. And the good thing with visual supports is they're not transient. Words are transient. You say them and they're gone. Whereas visuals, if you've got them there, someone can see them, okay, and it's clear. And it's that's what we're doing. Prepare for what's going to happen, and this doesn't mean that you need an absolute day set in stone with absolutely every single thing marked off at times and minutes. But sometimes that preparation for when things are going to happen and if things are going to happen needs to be there. So it's not just spur of the moment. Oh, we're going here, or we've got to do that. And sometimes, in some cases, follow the person's lead, how they're comfortable. So if you're going somewhere that you know is maybe more of a challenge to be, but you do need to go there, then actually allow the person to break that down and actually go through their own stages of being able to sort of access that environment. Yeah, be aware of the environment and any adaptations that might need to happen. You know, and this can be, you know, for example, if you're going out into a busy environment with someone and you know they know, or you know that they struggle with noises and stuff like that, it might be they're wearing a hooded top, so they can put a hood up and it can blinker some of the visual information, it can sort of muffle some of the sound. It might be that they listen to some music when they're in those environments, because actually it can be quite stressful to have all that information. They just like having that sort of one piece of audio, one piece of what am I looking at for the music information, just to kind of keep them regulated. It might be where they wear a cap, so actually it's reducing down that visual field as well. So just thinking of different ways you can alter that environment. I mean, any way you can, and it's looking at sort of trying to get that sensory desensitization. So you're reducing the amount of sensory load that is being put onto an individual in that situation. But it isn't necessarily about you going, well, I'm going to do this. It's about talking to them and getting their understanding of what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So some examples there of, you know, listening to music, noise cancelling headphones, fidget toys, wearing sunglasses if it's particularly bright, or even if it's not, but you're going into it, you don't think it is, it doesn't mean someone else doesn't think it is. So someone might need to wear, you know, sunglasses within an office room because the fluorescent lights are particularly bright and they're really difficult to kind of manage that level of brightness. Knowing if you're going somewhere you're going to have to be sat down for a period of time, knowing you can have movement breaks between things and you actually can get up and move around. Yeah, so just some sort of simple, straightforward things to think about when you're working with individuals. Again, visual information, photos of things, where you're going, if it's a clinic appointment, written information about what might be happening within an appointment that they're going to that might be particularly stressful for them. Find out about any adaptations that can be made to clinic appointments if that's what they're doing. Can the appointment be made longer because of their presenting needs, and allowing them that time and space to be able to kind of sort of to accommodate within those settings.
So we found at Snaps that we have taken pictures, and there is a video of what happens when you arrive, what the place looks like, and it walks you on a journey through. We do need to update. However, that has helped some of our young people knowing what's expected. What does the building look like? How far is it from the front door to where I need to get in? How clinical are the clinic rooms? Because, you know, however much we all try to make it less clinical, there are children and young people that don't like going to the doctor, they don't like hospitals. By the nature of us being called Snapdragons, we've tried to make that slightly different, but to actually physically walk through it on a video has been quite a big positive for some of our young people and children, and the same about what's actually going to happen. And the ability to talk that through prior so that there are no surprises. I don't think, you know, everybody's like that. I don't want to go somewhere where I don't know exactly what's happening. We are at the moment looking to get some, we're calling them sensory bags, for the reception, so that if somebody is coming in and they feel the lighting in here, you can see is really bright, and some of the lights we cannot alter, that we have sunglasses, we have anything and everything in the bag, and that person can come to reception and ask for support if they haven't bought their own equipment, if you like, or their own hat or their own sunglasses with them. So it's probably one of the good ideas to carry bits and pieces so that if it's highlighted, you're able to support whatever that need is.
It is about really looking at making reasonable adjustments for things as well. This is just an example of kind of like, you know, like I said before, if they've got an appointment somewhere, ask questions about those things during, before, after. Does the appointment need to be longer in length? When is the appointment need to be at the start of the day, at the end of the day, where the waiting rooms might be quiet? So that's just an example of going to an appointment, but it's looking at what reasonable adjustments can be made within environments to allow that autistic individual to be able to access those places, those environments. I run something called the Early Bird program, an Early Bird Plus program, which is a post-diagnostic parent workshop, which teaches, well, doesn't teach, just kind of puts autism into what it is for their children. And one of the bits that the National Autism Society have freely available on their website is something called the one-page profile. Hopefully you can see that. It might be a little bit small, but basically it's around an individual being able to kind of highlight, you know, on a page where some of their preferences are and where some of their challenges are. So you've got things around sensory differences, how they might like to communicate, their challenges or their dislikes, etc., so forth. This is just a way and a means that if you're working with individuals that you might be able to introduce with them, so you can get to know a little bit about them. And it's just like, it's like 8 different areas that you can just sort of touch upon.
I think one of the good things on this as well is the signs of stress and anxiety, and I think that's a really important one as well. So we get to know, we do that as colleagues. I know when Sam's stressed because I know how he looks. He knows when I am, and therefore you can communicate, change, and adapt to support that person. So it's just the same as you know, I'm sure your best friends, your partners, your husbands, your wives, whatever, how you know that they react when they are beginning to become slightly stressed about a situation. I think that's an important one to know, so that you are aware. It may not be able to be stopped, and it may that it needs to happen. However, the awareness of that. Worked with a young gentleman who was 14 years ago, and he had somebody taking him out during the day. He was home educated, and the lady thought, you know, we're going to go and get a cup of coffee, we're going to do this. And each time they went, he became really, really, really stressed. And it was as simple as, when we looked at it and spoken to this young gentleman, that he didn't like the area that he was going into because he didn't like the coffee place that he was going. It was too loud. He liked coffee. He wanted to go for a coffee. He wanted his cake, but he just couldn't work himself to get into that door. Whereas the coffee shop down the road, when we worked out, actually, that was a lot quieter. The stress and anxiety, it went for him. So I guess it's just enabling that young man then to be able to and access outside with the carer that he happened to be with.
We're coming sort of towards the end. I've attached in this slide just some just sort of resources that we often send into schools, but they're actually really useful for a lot of professionals working with autistic children and young people as well. So they're just little links to various places. The reasonable adjustments possible at school, accessed via the Autistic Girls Network. Although it's called the Autistic Girls Network, it's actually got a lot of really useful resources generally. It doesn't have to be used just for girls, but there's lots of really good, and it says in schools, but it does give a lot of information about how to make reasonable adjustments to sessions you might be doing, or places you might be visiting, or things that the individual can do to make that adjustment to an area they find particularly stressful. And again, a couple of other resources there. Some of the best place, or the best place to go, I would say, is the National Autism Society website. They've got lots and lots of resources. They've also got other workshops and stuff like that for professionals and parents, as well as some podcasts for sort of young people with an ASD diagnosis, to kind of learn a little bit more around it, but also to kind of gather that, work into that network. And it's all sort of the information that there is all vetted, if that makes sense. So it's not like going onto Google and just typing something in and getting anything globally. It does allow sort of that sort of vetted process. So a lot of the information there is really, really good. So that is it from us, but we are open to questions, and hopefully we'll give you some answers if you have any.
I thought it was really, really helpful what the slideshow has given me personally, supporting families. It's really good, really enjoyed it. And I was going to ask whether there's a chance we could get a copy of these slides to refer back to.
Yeah, I think so. I think I can't take the credit. Sam takes the credit for this presentation, and absolutely, I'm sure we can ping that over to you. Should we ping it to you, Vicky? Would that be helpful?
Yes, please. If you could send it to me, I can share that round. And I'll share it with the recording as well.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely.
We do also have what we've called an MCH support sheet. It was slightly too big to put into the presentation, and Sam and I got a bit confuddled, if like, trying to do so. I can always attach that. That's a list of national, local charities, all different support that we would give to the young person and family when they come to us, so that they can access. Some of it does have titles where potentially we would give it to children and young people who receive a diagnosis. However, that does not matter whether people want to go on and just have a look at the support. It will support anyway, because it's more about that intervention and support. But to be mindful, if children or young people or families are on a waiting list and they haven't had a diagnosis, they can still go on and have a look at some of this information, which may well help them.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, because there's such a waiting list, isn't there, as we know, for these for young people. Yeah,
and I think sometimes parents come in and they have had they've been on the waiting list, and I think the key thing is that when a diagnosis is given, it's sometimes it's just for parents, and even for the young person, depending on their age or not, it's just sort of a relief, or at least a way of identifying quite often where some of my challenges have come from as well. But that said, in terms of what can be put in place, as a therapist, I will always look at need. There are children that I see that have a higher level of need at one time and then another child does, and we address that. I might know they're autistic, I might know that they've got ADHD, but I'm not treating their condition. I'm treating the characteristics of their profile. So actually, if there's a child that's waiting for an assessment for investigations into autism, they might not get that autism diagnosis. They might not meet that diagnostic criteria based on all the information that we gathered and the decision made by the paediatrician. That doesn't mean that we're saying that those individuals don't have needs and presentations that still need support. So they can, quite a lot of the things that we talk around from an ASD point of view, if someone is presenting with some traits of various bits and pieces, they can still those things can still be used to help support them.
Lisa.
Yeah, no, it's just about the waiting time. I was just going to reiterate that, really. My daughter is now 20. She went to CAMS when she was 12. She was only had her assessment, and that was from CAMS, not because she was moved over to adult. So from CAMS to her assessment, yeah, she had her assessment when she was 19. So her whole of her schooling was absolutely disrupted and horrendous, horrendous. So I know the waiting time was long, but to me, that was absolutely disgusting.
We definitely are from an MCH's point of view trying very hard to put support in whilst there is a way.
This was under CAMS.
Yeah.
So
But I think we're aware that, you know, there is a national increase. It's gone up by 70%. And I think from Sam and my point of view, I think Peter's on the call, we are trying to put as much support in pre-diagnosis or not diagnosis and post. So what we're trying to do is within our pathways, we have our coloured pathways, the yellow, green, indigo. The yellow one is for preschool, the green is for school aged, and that covers OT and SLT. And what we've been trying to do is to be able to put some of the bits that we've spoken about, some of the strategies, some of the ways of looking at those individual children and supporting the families to say, have you tried? Have you tried? Can we do? So that they have some form of support, whatever that looks like, whether it's a strategy, whether it's a referral to Karen from the social prescribing side. But absolutely, it's about that journey.
It's so hard because as an adult and a person who works in a certain industry, I get and I know that everyone's under pressure. But as a parent, you find yourself sliding from that to parent mode.
Of course.
So it's like you're like that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Kerry.
I just wanted to ask, out of interest, like we know you've said there it's gone up 70% in regard to this. Have you got any ideas why? Is it because we're recognising it more now?
I think so.
What's your thoughts?
I think there is, I mean, I've been with the team for 20 years, and I think in terms of, you know, and obviously the way services have seen children and assessed them, etc., has changed over that period of time, obviously. But, you know, the numbers are in terms of referrals to, and then accepting those referrals for further investigations. And actually what's showing is actually even with the increased numbers and the increased acceptance of referrals, we're still diagnosing the same percentages on larger amounts. Does that make sense? Not to strip everybody back to just figures and data, but reasons why, I mean, you know, from, if we take it, and this is me and thoughts rather than it is anything set in stone from a you know, a definite point of view or data that's been gathered, but within Medway, if you look at the sort of the population within Medway, that has gone up exponentially, you know, over my 20 years working with the team. If I think about fields, places that used to be fields that are now housing estates and housing developments and stuff like that. So actually there's a huge amount of that. There's more schools in the area. In terms of Medway Hospital, it's now tier 3. It's a tier 3 hospital, which basically means that children that are born prem will be life-saving interventions will be given at was it below 24 weeks. So we're seeing survival rates because of medicine, if you like, much higher. And we know that individuals that are prem are more likely to present with additional challenges and needs and differences. That could be from a neurodivergent point of view. It can be from, you know, other, you know, from lots of other cerebral palsy and stuff like that. But we're seeing a lot more children that live locally and are local that are being born preterm, are being saved much younger. Therefore, the impact of that as well is we're starting to see as well, I would say. There's also something in the water, maybe. But you know, it is quite frightening how, and also there is a greater understanding. If we just take autism in isolation, there is a greater understanding of what autism is and what it looks like generally, but also specifically around girls and how it can look very different. You know, historic information, historic sort of data and everything is all basically based on white 12-year-old boys. You know, that's where the information is derived from, and the presentations and a lot of the diagnostic criteria is kind of set around that. But the research and everything into kind of, you know, a female presentation of autism can be very, very different. Still has the same characteristic, but as a kind of how that presents in that individual can be much harder to kind of sometimes find the wrong word, but kind of come to the fore. And quite often you'll see girls that are diagnosed as they're going into their teens or going into their 20s as sort of social pressures and academic pressures get bigger.
Yeah.
So I haven't really given you an answer there, but there's lots and lots of things there that could be reasons why.
Any other questions before we let you go? No. Thank you. Well, I hope you did find that useful. And like I said, we will ping over the presentation for you and also ping over the support lists that we've got. They've got QR codes on, so some families like that, they've got web links on. So we've tried to cover all eventualities, so that I presume that might be something helpful for you if you need to signpost. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.